We can't gather in person this year, but we've adapted. The 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival brings the best in film from across the globe and around the corner. And this year, it's all virtual, so the films and events are coming directly to you. Join us for the 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival, October 15th through the 29th. More information is at mkefilm.org/MFF.
Good evening, and welcome to day 2 of the 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival presented by Associated Bank. I'm Kara, and I'm the artistic director at Milwaukee Film, and this is the Nightcap, presented by the Ibuki Family Foundation. I'm going to remind you, because this is my chance to remind you live, to not forget to cast your vote for the Alan H. Budd and Suzanne L. Seelig Audience Awards. To do that, you're going to visit the film or the shorts program page at watch.mkefilm.org, where you either enter as a pass holder and find the film that you want to vote for, or re-enter with your ticket code. And on that film info page, there's a button that says Vote Now. You just click through there and you'll be connected to a form that will serve as your ballot. Same scale as normal. 5 is excellent. 1 is not so excellent, but different than before. Please don't tear your computer screen to vote. You're going to use your mouse and click and enter and do those kinds of things. Don't get confused about the paper ballot thing. As I'm sure you've all seen, we have a double up challenge that is happening. Thanks to the generosity of Judith McGregor and Dick Galloon, if we raise $75,000 during the festival, they will double it. And to help us out with that, you can text double up to 44321. You can go to our website and go to the donate page. That's mkefilm.org/donate. Or you can join us as a member, or if you have an October renewal, your renewal will count toward that. If you're interested in joining us as a member, you can go to mkefilm.org/members. All of that will help us contribute to our goal that we have. As of earlier today, we have raised just over $30,000, which is really incredible. We're almost halfway there, not quite. And it's, it's only day 2, but what if we crushed it first weekend? You might stop having to hear me talk about this. Probably not, but it would be really incredible to feel that support from all of you. Milwaukee Film is really grateful for the support that you all have given us. Our community really has supported us. It's been a tough year, not only for us, but obviously for everybody. And it means a lot to us that you see us as vital to what our city needs at this time. Our members get free access to films throughout the year, discounts on tickets, on passes, merch, more, and they help keep us going. So if you're already a member, thank you. I'm missing giving you the compliments that I give you in my film intros on stage. I'm sure you're looking wonderful. I just know it. I can feel it through the screen. And if you're not yet a member, consider joining us and tell all your friends about what a great deal it is. And if you feel moved to support us. This evening, we will be joined by the filmmakers from 3 different films. First, from So Late, So Soon, then Speakeasy B, then RINGOLEVIO. And we'll have programmers to moderate the conversation, but if you have questions or comments for those films, feel free to drop them in the chat wherever you are. If you're out there on Facebook or YouTube, all those places, throw your words into those chats. They'll make their way to us, and we will moderate them into the conversation as we go. All right, I'd like to welcome on screen with me first, the director of So Late, So Soon, Daniel Hymanson.
Hello.
Hi. So Daniel, tell us a little bit of the background about how you came to know Jackie and Dawn.
Yeah, so Jackie taught a weekend children's art class at the school, the Art Institute in Chicago. And when I was when I was 3 years old, I took that class with my sister, and they were just these incredible art classes. And she'd do things like cover the walls with crumpled up brown paper, and we'd make paintbrushes out of sticks and fur, and we were cavemen making cave paintings, and she'd change the environment. You see that in the film a bit, her sort of changing the environment in these classrooms, or the kids doing it. And so they're just these incredible classes. And then my family stayed in contact with her, and we have lunch every couple months, and I got introduced to her artwork and her husband Don's artwork and the house that they lived in. And then when I was a teenager, we'd play music together. And so I'd come over to the house and I'd play bass and she'd play piano. And she was always just someone who I felt very lucky to know and lucky to have in my life, and who I admired very much and looked up to. And then sort of over the course of making the film, we became like much closer and like closer friends through that process also.
Mm-hmm. I think in watching the film, you feel that sort of, what I'm going to call it, kind of like this loving care of like the former student. I think that is felt in the way that you're telling the story. I'm wondering kind of, what was your goal? Were you hoping to, I'm going to throw out a whole bunch of suggestions. Hopefully none of them are right, and you tell me something else. Were you wanting to kind of like honor, to document, to preserve, to add to the body of work? Like what did, and maybe did that change over the course of making the film?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changed. Like I started out wanting to make sort of a more, just like I hadn't watched a lot of documentaries when I started making the film. And then also I just didn't think that much about it. And I was like, Jackie is just like sort of one of the most, she's just like the coolest person I know. And so I wanted to make a film about her. And I knew her as like an artist and her artwork and as like a teacher. And so it started out as a film where I thought I was just going to interview her about her artwork and her teaching. And so I did that for like 6 months or so. Mm-hmm. Like I just sort of did these interviews with her. And then I had all that interview footage and I edited something together. And then I sort of realized after showing people that like whatever it was that I felt was so special about being in the house and was so like remarkable about her artwork and sort of just like being around them wasn't in that footage. Like it just wasn't communicated through that type of like filmmaking. And so I like went back and was like way more like flexible about like what it was becoming, and didn't have I didn't sort of have as clear cut like intentions going into it. And so I would have never necessarily wanted to make a film about what the film ended up becoming, but sort of that just was what they were most engaged with when I was like here. And like, I'm glad it became that, but it became that because sort of that's just what was going on. Yeah.
So you sort of had the instinct of like, there's something here. But it's really interesting to hear that you started out with sort of a straightforward, like, well, we'll interview you and that is how we will, gain this knowledge. But that wasn't the right way to access kind of the knowledge of the story that Jackie has, sort of as part of the spirit there. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
A person who is so, I don't want to say not communicating through like straightforward verbal, like, articulations. Like there's a different kind of articulation that's happening through her work that I can imagine the interviews wouldn't capture.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah. Were there surprises? You knew Jackie and Don, not just as a filmmaker, but in the course of making the film, either in those interviews or in this sort of like, let's see what this becomes. What was maybe most surprising to you about what you learned?
I mean, I think like the moments that I like most in the movie are like what is most surprising, sort of like what I wouldn't have been able to anticipate before. And I think like a lot of the stuff in there is stuff that was surprising to me, like, and that's why it sort of stuck. Because it's just like more interesting than something that I could have like thought would happen, Yeah, I mean, I think I got to know them both through like the film mostly takes place over the course of like 3 months of filming, but I sort of shot it over the course of 8 years. Okay. So like I learned so much that was like about the two of them, and sort of, and so much of it was surprising. Just like, I think like you're learning stuff about any new sort of, I mean, they had been in my life for so long, but like I learned so much that was new about them through making the film.
Like, yeah, through that time spent and being in going to say like a more, I want to say intimate, but that isn't quite what I mean, but sort of that being around one another in not, well, we're having a meal or we're doing this activity, but we're just together. I imagine that's how you learn more about people, in those sort of moments in between activities.
Yeah, totally. And it's also like a strange opportunity to just get to, I mean, it's just like, just to sit around. It's like the camera is like an excuse, I guess, to just like be able to sit around some people in like these very mundane moments. And like, you can learn something about them, different sort of things about them in that way, I guess. Also.
Yeah. Usually I ask a question for documentaries, like how you gain the trust of your subject. I don't think that's the right question here, but I want to ask a question sort of about the reaction to making a film. So much of Jackie's work feels like it's about kind of this momentariness, this sort of ephemerality. And in many ways, like a documentary sort of pushes against that or is in tension with that. Were any of those considerations part of the discussion? And it's sort of like an artist looking at an artist. Were there conversations around that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like I spent a lot of time like trying to like frame her artwork, like put it like literally like in like the frame. And like it always just it like just didn't work out well. So I think that's related to what you were saying. It's like and I think that's also related to like her not really working. It didn't really work for me to like ask her to describe it also, because it's so like the artwork doesn't have a beginning and ending in the house. Like it sort of it sort of is constantly changing. And so what I thought most effectively sort of gave some sense of what it was sort of just like following her and occasionally seeing her sort of tweak something, or sort of moments where she's actually like building an installation or something like that, rather than like me trying to like say, okay, here's like a distinct installation, this is what it is. And we had like montages like that for a while, and it didn't work really. I didn't think it worked.
Yeah. When at least from the film, and tell me if this is not true, but it feels like she's never not working, but she's also not ever like, and now I am going to be working. It sort of blurs between the activities of the everyday and the activities of the art, sort of blur into one another, much like the art sort of blurs through space.
Yeah.
So it's like you're just, walking from one room to another, and it's like, hold on, like, moving things around. Oh wait, all of a sudden she's doing art there, and living is doing art. Do you have any updates since you finished the film?
You mean like with Jackie and Don?
Yeah.
So Don died about a year ago, and so I mean, which is it's like I feel very lucky that I got to have this experience with him and got to get so much closer with him over the last like decade making this film. Like I feel very, very lucky about that. And Jackie, Jackie's living in sort of a smaller apartment space that's a little bit easier to maintain right now. And like, but she has really like transformed it and like made it look like her space. So there's like, it looks like her colors and the pastel colors and the suitcases and the installations. It's just like the house, but just like sort of, and they're new installations, but it's sort of the same type of thing, but it's in 2 rooms instead of a big house.
Yeah. And I assume she's had a chance to see the film. You premiered the film before we all went into this virtual space. Was she able to go to the premiere?
She did go to the premiere.
Right? What was her response to the film?
I was like very worried because she's like extremely opinionated and just has strong feelings about like films in particular, and so I've been worried for like a long time about what she was going to think, and like she seems to like the film a lot, and she seems to feel very proud of it, which was like a huge relief to me because like, she worked on it. She worked very hard on it also for a long time. It was really nice. So
to be able to have that before we all moved into our respective little boxes on screens. How has you recently got distribution for the film? Do you have reflections on sort of, launching this film into the world this year, or stories from sort of being a filmmaker in 2020 that are, useful, smart, reflective? I mean, I think it's really, this is something I'm sort of asking lots of filmmakers, like, how are you doing?
I feel like with the film and sort of like it going to festivals during this period, like I also feel very lucky about that also, because True False, where the film premiered, like I got to see the film with people on March 6th, which is like crazy. Like a week later, like, the world was falling apart, but at the time it didn't seem like it was that way to us. And so, yeah, I mean, I got to have that experience with like an audience, and like an audience that, the film maybe it was like and Jackie was able to be there, which was like so amazing. And so we got to have just like a really sort of amazing premiere, and then everything shut down. But yeah, I mean, that feels, because I have friends, of course, that like also had films coming out now, and like they can't. I just feel, and I've never made a movie before, so it's like amazing to see that, like see it with an audience. And then also, I'm doing pretty good. I'm actually in Jackie's letting me.
Are you in the house?
I'm in the house. So like I also like our editor lives in Paris, and so we edited the film in Paris. Very nice place to edit a film. So I had been editing in Paris and I had been living in France for like a couple of years, sort of. And then I'd come here to finish the film, and was I was in New York, but like didn't have a permanent spot really. And it's not a good place to be doing that like in March of this year. And so, and Jackie has let me stay here since March. And it's been like, yeah, I mean, a very, very, as she's selling the house, we're like getting ready to sell it. Or I'm like helping in any way I can, so yeah, it's been a very, very comfortable place to quarantine also.
And to sort of it's like you're quarantining inside of your film.
Yeah.
Which is it's probably very strange. Also, important note, all of you out there, the house is going to be for sale. If you're in the market, just watch. It's good location.
Very good location. near the lake is right over there.
Yeah. What are you working on now or next? You're working on helping get the house ready to be sold.
I'm like sort of working on a movie that I've been making here. It's like a experiment. I mean, but it's about me living here and sort of the process of, I mean, it's sort of a mess right now, and I don't really know what it's about, but it started off as sort of like a journal type of project where I was recording conversations with people on FaceTime or Zoom, my parents and friends and Jackie and stuff, and then has, I think, evolved into something about like me being at the house and sort of and the process and sort of like, I don't know, the process of, in some way, Jackie moving or like leaving the house and me being here as she tries to sort of begin trying to sell it. So I've been filming myself in the house a lot.
Yeah. It's sort of a sequel.
It is a sequel, yeah. It's a
sequel, but it's I don't know. At a point early in the film, a viewer feels like, oh, maybe this is a film about these people, but maybe this is a film about this house, and it becomes sort of both naturally. But maybe this is a little bit more about the house without its people. I don't know. I'm helping conceptualize what this might be before, I don't know if that's helpful. If it is,
that is helpful.
It.
Yeah.
If it's not, forget I said it. Wonderful. Well, we're going to look for that next film, the sequel. Folks who haven't maybe had a chance, it's only day 2. If you haven't had a chance to watch So Late, So Soon, please do. Thank you, Daniel, for being with us, 90 minutes up the road in Milwaukee. Would have been easy for you to come in person, but it's just as easy for you to be here virtually. Thank you. And I'm going to welcome Aster, our genrequeer coordinator, to host our next segment. Hi, Aster.
Hello, Kara.
Look, there's Beef.
Yeah, he came to join. This is
Excellent.
Beef the cat. My boy.
Great.
All right. Hey, everyone out there in Virtual Film Festival land. Thanks for tuning in tonight. My name is Aster Gilbert, and I am the genrequeer coordinator. So the genrequeer program spotlights the best in documentary and fiction filmmaking that explores LGBTQIA voices and experiences. At genrequeer, we celebrate the past, present, and future of cinema's rich queer tradition. And with me tonight, I have two special guests, the filmmaking team behind one of the genrequeer short film selections, Speak Easy B, which if you haven't seen it, you can check it out in the genrequeer experimental shorts program. And please join me in virtually welcoming our guests now. Hello.
Hello, Aster.
Hello. So I guess before diving in, I would love for you both to introduce yourselves and your relationship to Speak Easy B for the audience.
Yeah. My name is Becca Park. I go by they, them pronouns. And I am the co-director, writer, and star of Speak Easy B.
My name is Shimizu, he, him pronouns, and I'm the co-director, co-producer, and editor of Speak Easy B.
Perfect. Thank you. So I guess to get started, the question I like to ask all filmmakers is, how did this project come about? And how did you both get involved in it? Becca, I think it's maybe a personal project. I'm just assuming, but yeah, I like to frame the question that way.
Definitely. So Speak Easy B is sort of a meditative experimental short that was shot out in the desert, kind of evoking this reflective process I was having, wrestling with my identity at the time as a queer female, processing the depression that came out of, first love and, dealing with, just coming into yourself and extracting yourself from a relationship. So it was a lot of complex issues that at the time, I'm 29 now, and this was more of a film reflecting on my sort of earlier 18 to 22-year-old self, where I didn't really have the language to, process anything. I didn't even know non-binary was an identity. That's how I identify as now. But so I really instead poured it into visual. So that's why the film is actually a bunch of vignettes of dreams that had come to me. Quite literally, each scene was something that I had written in a dream log, and reading it over, it was like, wow, I'm clearly processing something. And I just kind of wrote it all together, and I roped in June, who has been a dear friend of mine since the college days. This was my first short film. This was, I believe, June's third. And so I really relied on having a co-director was instrumental in me being able to just kind of flow through the process and be in front of camera, and entrust someone who is not only like my best friend, but also a staunch ally in the community to take the reins behind the camera. If June, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just, the only thing I want to add is I find it funny because initially, you came to me and you were like, June, will you direct this short film? And I was like, okay. And then we're in pre-production, and you're like, no, the scene has to be like this, and no, the actor isn't right. And these landscapes don't work. We got to get, and I was like, you should co-direct this. This is your baby, because she was doing everything, or they were doing everything aside from that. And it was basically it turned into a very organic process where this thing became a weird little baby that we reared, and incrementally, I learned so much on this project because I had directed short films in the past, and it had always been under the auspices of, what can we work with? like what will cost the least amount of money. But for Becca, this project was like their dream baby, and there were absolutely no compromises. Everything that you see is exactly, what they dreamed of and what they were thinking of. And for me, that really taught me a valuable lesson about sticking and committing to your vision. So yeah, it was a really great experience.
Awesome. I definitely want to celebrate best friend cinema. I think that's an incredible way of making movies, is just grabbing some buddies. But those responses touch on a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask. And I guess I'm really interested in the shared dynamic of co-directing, because it sounds like it was, if I'm hearing correctly, a collaborative process.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested in hearing a little more about how that worked. And also, June, what you mentioned is, what is that like coming on board of such a personal project that's not your personal experience? That seems like a lot of responsibility as a filmmaker and a best friend.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, June, you go.
At first, it was interesting because at first, there was definitely an element of it that was like, how would a director adapt something that they haven't written, right? But because we were co-directing, there was more of a sort of like tagging in and out. But there was, I think, always a very clear shared vision. Becca was very clear with what like they wanted, and I think ultimately it came down to the things like, as a director, trying to keep the train rolling, but also what I personally identified with and could emotionally connect with. Ultimately, like, that's what you're doing when you're directing, is you're connecting emotionally to something, and you're trying to realize it into reality. And it was easy because I very much identified, there were themes, of course, that were very specific to Becca's experience. I'm cisgender, but there were a lot of things that I identified with as an Asian, as one of the only Asians in my high school, and in my not in my country, but I grew up in a very white country, and so it was just kind of connecting personally to those things. And I don't know. I think the only time, Becca, like, we actually had conflicting directing was like once, right, where I said something and then you said something to the actress, and she was like, well, which one is it?
Right. And I think that was actually only one moment, because to June's point, I think we you fear of like working with family or friends in like some kind of working or business relationship. And June, I think we really lucked out that trust, that foundation of our friendship. And I felt and do feel very seen by you. So there was nothing really to prove there. I could just be my full authentic self. And I knew that, there's a certain level, I think, that was required of a co-director, and that, June, you really stepped up to the plate in just kind of being there and letting, anything that I felt really strongly about, June, you kind of sidestepped and were like, okay, then that's how it is. This is your experience. I think in ways you did push, and we challenged each other on, let's rush and get this done, or, this is a better shot or something, which is, that's just how the best decisions come to be made, when you realize what you do want, or even more importantly, what you don't want. But that was a huge,
more contention in the editing process, I want to say, right?
Editing was a little bit of a beast.
Yeah.
Both of us were really in it at that point, but yes.
Okay, so that is my next question. I love asking about editing processes. It's personally my favorite part of films, is to see how they're cut together. And particularly with more experimental films, I'm always interested to know, or to find out rather, how much of the film was an exploration, finding out as you go along, and how much of it adhered to the original concept. Was any of this discovered in the editing, or was that kind of a tension of visions there?
Yeah. So I learned a lot in even just this whole process as like a first time filmmaker. I was they say, kill your babies, where, you just have to like kill certain scenes and things that you're like, oh, I know we have to have it. So I was pretty locked into the shooting script that we had. And then the second, after you shoot and you're in the edit, it just all kind of goes out the window because, you're trying to find a certain pace. And for me, it was really important to have breathing room. I really wanted, there's not a lot of dialogue, if much at all, in the film. And so, how can you make a film move forward when there's not really technically much happening? So that was a lot for us on our side, working with our composer to really kind of like drive us forward in each scene. And we actually had one of the biggest scenes that didn't make it in was my character had this cathartic moment in the kitchen with an ancestor, a grandmother coming to sit down, and my character is unable to speak Korean to their grandmother. The grandmother's unable to speak English, and they end up speaking in French in this dream world. And unfortunately, it just didn't read. It just didn't read the way that you want, like a nice, poignant ending to. So we actually, that was the biggest thing for June and I arguing. June really wanted to keep it in, and I thought, it's just to hit home with all this dialogue it's tonally just doesn't sit right. And I think ultimately we made the right move.
Yeah, I'm so glad we got rid of the grandma. Sorry, grandma. But it was like, but it's interesting because going back to, the original collaborative thing, the visions, like, I feel like the grandma was something you felt very strongly about in pre-production and when we were shooting it. And it just, like you said, it didn't really come together the way you wanted, or it was too ham-fisted of an ending. And so that was actually really fun, finding a way to end it with what we had, excluding that scene. There was another scene that we cut, and I think for me, the most triumphant moment of the film was figuring out the dancing in the desert scene, because that was just Becca and the director and I in the middle of this searing hot heat in Death Valley, in the middle of these salt flats for like 4 hours. We're just shooting, and we don't have like a temp track or anything like that. So I'm shooting Becca, and I'm just saying like, okay, now you're feeling like the energy course through your body. The whole thing was just improv. Like, okay, now you're feeling it in your face and in your hands, and it's escaping you from up above. And we had to actually retrofit what we shot with, a temp track, and then get that temp track rescored with a new track. And so it was a very unconventional way of shooting, but it was very rewarding because it felt like we were actually capturing the spirit of the film without any external influences. And so that was very much where the sort of experimental, finding it in the editing came into play. And that was really interesting as an editor also for me to discover that. Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like we're kind of circling around the subject of the desert, which is something that I wanted to bring up. But before I forget, I thought maybe instead of kill your darlings or kill your babies, you could have the kill your grandma. Like, you have to cut that out.
Thank you for this, Aster. I'm going to take this moving forward.
Yeah, just, it's yours. You can have it.
Now I'll know. Just kill the grandmas. It's been done before. I can do it.
Mm-hmm. You made it through.
Apologies to grandmas everywhere.
But on the subject of the desert, the desert really stands out in this film as a character itself. And the photography is gorgeous. The editing rhythms are gorgeous. I'm a huge fan of this film. Everyone out there in the audience, please check it out. It's amazing. But the desert really takes on this role in the film. And for me, it was bringing up, well, one, I want to hear, like, what is it about the desert? A personal connection? Does it serve a kind of metaphorical significance? And I was also thinking of the role that deserts play in traditions of queer literature and queer cinema, like the writings of Derek Jarman, Eli Clare, Gus Van Sant's films, gay hardcore from the 70s, Desert Hearts, the great lesbian film. Like, the desert has a kind of imaginary in queer thinking. And
Priscilla, Queen of Desert.
Yes. So I'm curious to hear, I'd love to hear your thoughts about why the desert, what drew you there, what it was like shooting there. And I'll stop talking because I'll keep going on about the desert.
I love that. I love all those references, Aster. Honestly, when I wrote Speak Easy Bee, the desert just stood out to me as this land of possibility, and like a blank canvas. I grew up in a predominantly white suburb in Massachusetts, so New England vibes, fall, woodsy. So the desert to me was very foreign until I moved to LA about 5 years ago, and that's really, I think, when I started to start reflecting, I think, a little bit subconsciously about my gender identity, and that didn't even come into fruition until after the film. But for me, the desert was just this kind of magical, spiritual. You can't quite put your finger on it. There's something really special that happens when the sun goes down and there's just this stillness. And to me, I just wanted to like capture that stillness and bottle it up and like shove it into the mind and be like, if you had this stillness and this open space to just really explore and kind of expand your own and move past your own barriers, like what would still stand. So for me, the desert was just that perfect playground to, and I think visually also, just I had this obsession with like going into the desert of the mind, are you going to find that oasis? And so there's something just kind of like trailblazing journey. It's almost like there's no end or there's no destination in the desert. It's kind of, so a lot of metaphorical things that I wanted to kind of play with and that I felt very just like personally connected to, even though, I have not grown up at all around the desert. So yeah, land of possibility for me.
It's a very beautiful description. June, did you have anything you wanted to add about working with the desert or shooting there, or how you were thinking about it?
It's really hard. There's no connection out there, so we use walkie-talkies, and sometimes that wouldn't work, and so it's just crazy. It's so hot, and it's very beautiful and rewarding if you find the right place. I mean, we originally scouted Joshua Tree, and the whole time I'm going like, what about that place? I'm still thinking, with like conventional, like, let's just use what we have, filmmaker, DIY. Oh, that looks good. And Becca was just like, no. And so we had to drive out to Death Valley. And I'm so glad we did because, like you said, the desert is a personality. A personality is very much a character in the film. And Death Valley has these amazing varied landscapes. I mean, the like sand dunes and the rockiness, and
it looks like Mars.
It's just a different planet. And there was something about the heat that made it feel like a gauntlet shooting there, where it was like, wow, we really went through something together. But going back to the conceptual aspect, Becca, one thing I remember you kept mentioning was the oasis aspect, and I don't want to obviously like speak for you, but I felt like in terms of the things that you were kind of trying to explore, that idea of the oasis was something that was very powerful, and that was like a through line, a mental through line with, every iteration of the script or whatever, or the film that we would go through. And I was very much connected to that and found that very interesting, because we're all looking for our little oasis, in our mind, our place to feel, happy and comfortable with ourselves and accept the things that happened and stuff like that.
Perfect. Beautiful. Well, I think for our little segment, we're just about out of time. I do want to give the opportunity to ask, what's next for you? Are you collaborating on anything else, working on something different? Can you say, or is it too early yet?
We're actually, this is kind of a rounding out our festival run. So June and I were actually starting to explore how we can distribute Speakeasy Bee, what would be the best online platform. So if anyone here has any recommendations, hit us up. We're kind of, we're trying to figure it out as we go as well. So and in terms of next projects, I know June is working on something. I'm just continuing to percolate on what's going to be the next experimental queer piece.
I'm working on my first feature film, and it's a Koreatown horror film. And we'll see. I don't know. It's very hard work doing a feature film, so we'll see what happens.
Well, I'm very excited. I love experimental and horror, so you just hit two of my favorite genres. thank you so much for being here and being a part of the festival. I think now we're going to switch back to Kara. Thank you very much.
That's true. I'm back. And I'm going to welcome on screen with me the director and writer and producer and editor all of RINGOLEVIO, Kristen Peterson and Martin Kaszubowski. And hopefully Otto the dog. We'll see.
He's asleep
there
at my
somewhere.
feet, but he might come up over here.
He's snoozing. All right, we'll keep an eye out in case perhaps when he has a question to ask, he will try to put it in the chat, but because pause not so good, he'll have to come on screen to ask it.
He has no phone.
So, Kristen, can we start with kind of the origin story of RINGOLEVIO? Where's the inspiration? Kind of how did this look on cue? Thank you. He is the origin, the inspiration. That's not true.
Like staring at Kara on the screen. This is adorable.
I know he knows. It's fine.
The origin story, I mean, it's so, the creative process is a mystery all the time, and even into editing and screening it and having people respond to the film, like it just every step of the way has gained more clarity. So I guess one of the origin pieces was one of the first scenes in the film. I had no idea who the characters were. Just the interaction of pretending to cry and like catching your significant other to like trying to prove that they care about you. Like that kind of dynamic was so fascinating to me. So that's it started with a moment where usually, like especially with my poetry or like prose pieces, like it's never an interaction. It's like, what do I want to talk about or what do I want to explore, or the setting of something. So that's where it started. And then I've always been fascinated with like large families and sisters of brothers. So that had to be in something I wanted to make. So
are you interested in that because it is foreign or because it is familiar?
It's familiar in that I have observed it a lot.
Okay. It has the kind of familiarity that's like here familiar. So you're like, yes. I want to know it better, but you don't inherently know it well. That's really interesting. And it's interesting that you talk about the sort of difference between like, okay, so in poetry or in prose, it's like, here's this topic or here's this noun, but you were struck by this sort of moment of like betweenness of dialogue or of like on-screen tension. That's really an interesting kind of way of thinking. You're very wise in reflecting on your own process, that you're like, this moment, it was interesting to me. So then from there,
2 years of thinking about it.
You spent 2 years thinking about it. But so Marty, when and how did you get involved in the project and what were you drawn to?
Yeah, I was involved from the get-go. I'm married to the director of the film. So my involvement was she had been working on the script for a long time prior to my like active involvement. So I very much knew what she wanted to do with the movie, and that there were like 4 to 5 specific moments or images or chunks of dialogue that she had that were in the first draft of that script, and they are in the movie, like the crying in the opening of the movie. And there's a couple other things later. Spoiler alert. Like there's a shower scene. That shower scene is like identical to the first script, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So my involvement was like first just like kind of bouncing ideas off and on with her. And then once we were kind of pulling the trigger on making the movie, and we had a pretty tight turnaround, that's when my involvement kind of increased, and I came on as a co-writer to help finish it off, and then to give it a quicker turnaround in post too. So,
yeah. I want to ask a somewhat indulgent question, but we are here at the Milwaukee Film Festival, so I want to ask a question about filmmaking in Wisconsin and in the Milwaukee filmmaking community, about challenges, but also about joys. And in making this, which is your first fiction feature, maybe things that were surprising or new or discoveries in that process of making a film in Wisconsin.
This is like so much what both Marty and I talk about every moment of our lives. It's difficult to distill an answer. I think one of the greatest things that both of us had is that we've helped other people make fiction features before in different capacities. Marty was really involved with Carol Brandt's films, feature films. So he was on set. He was, helping talk about the script. So he was super involved with that process. His experience was so helpful for me. So I'm piggybacking off of that. But then both of us have produced dozens of short films for, a couple, 5 other directors in town. And I would say we're both writers first, screenwriters first, or most. Maybe it's just because that's the medium. You can write for free all the time. So we're involved in writing workshops a lot with other screenwriters. And I think one of the greatest assets is that there's this generosity of time here, and enthusiasm for new work. So we really rely on all these people to give us feedback and support us and help us not make stupid decisions. And also get us to the finish line. You can't just shoot a film, you have to finish it. So all of that support, but I'll let Marty talk about that too. If you want.
Yeah, I'll also give credit to the scenery in Wisconsin too. I think Wisconsin's landscape can be underrated. I think even from people we work with or people who shoot here, we can take it for granted that there's flatlands, there's hilly areas, there's lake areas, water areas. It's a
maybe no desert.
That's the only thing. Yes, that is the one.
Since we've been talking about the desert here.
It's true. Yes, that is the one.
There's dunes that look like the desert.
You can go to Sheboygan and shoot in the dunes, but you can't go too wide, and you can only shoot a certain way probably to make that work. But yeah, so that stuff, and mostly the community. There's a lot of people here who find a lot of joy in making creative work. And a lot of that comes from the school systems here too, the multiple colleges that teach both undergraduate and graduate degrees, and that helps kind of keep that artistic energy going, I think, a lot. And the film festival too, obviously. Grounds that, I think, and that's the thing that there's a lot of people who are very, very trained as technicians in the city who also care a lot about the art, and that's the thing that is can be taken for granted, I think.
Yeah. Do you want to talk at all about challenges of making films? You've been very celebratory.
No desert. That's a big one.
But it's always just money and resources and the ability to pay for that one piece of equipment to get that really great shot to increase your, production value. But that's everywhere. Every filmmaker wants more money and more resources and a cool jib,
Yeah. So. And it's cold, it's really cold 4 months of the year. And so that kind of locks you into only shooting certain times of the year. And then that's also when everybody, for the most part, works on the more commercially stuff. And so availability can be tough too. Those are challenges, but those are such logistical challenges that are just, things that exist everywhere in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
So. I think it's important that what you're saying is it's not, there's not different challenges. It's just the same universal challenges that are of filmmaking and, and getting it done. To sort of circle back to where Kristen started is getting it done is hard, no matter where you are working or how you are working or who you are, I think. And probably no matter how many films you've made. I'm just going to make an assumption that even for people who are very seasoned, that there's still labor there. It's not just, look, it's done. So, being done with a film, a good film is a done film.
Right. I think there's also new challenges and new expectations with every project too. So that, no matter what, a new project is a new project, no matter who you are, I think.
In sort of, from where you started and with these sort of anchor scenes. And it's interesting to hear, Marty, you describe that like there's certain moments or scenes or bits of dialogue or like a visual or whatever it is that like never changed. But where in the process of either, getting the script ready in production or in editing, where did you maybe have surprises in terms of things that turned out unexpectedly? I want both of you to tell me one.
I should say, like, on set, the 5 key actors were just incredible improvisational, is that the word? Performers, and probably my favorite top 5 moments were what they created out of nothing, or they kept going with the scene that was already written and they killed, but then we let them keep going, and that 10-second exchange was so delicious. So those are like really great surprises. And that's like, all of them have like theater training too. Mm-hmm. All of them have, most of them had improv training.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was really great.
Does that make you rethink your process as like writer director for future projects to sort of plan for more of those surprises?
Not necessarily, because the script was tight. But I think if I ever direct anything again, of course, I'm going to keep saying, like, it's not Bible, play with it. Like, let's play. Mm-hmm. I won't be very strict about that. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Marty,
surprises?
Surprises. I really don't know. I was thinking that whole time. I don't have a great one. Never be your own on-set caterer. That was a big one I learned. I was in charge of the food a lot because it's an independent film and that's how it goes sometimes. And oh boy, that was my big takeaway from the movie. Project, like, movie wise, no, I don't think so. Like, it was like Kristen was saying, the script was pretty tight and we didn't lose or drastically change anything once we got to post-production either. There was some rearranging, where we thought it was necessary, but no, I really don't have much. I
mean, we got lucky that there weren't too many surprises.
Right. And even like the improv aspect of the movie, like the actors, these were all people who were really good at knowing when they could fit it in and when they couldn't.
Yeah.
And it was never anything that was like changing the story drastically or anything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, you finish.
I should say, before Marty full-time jumped in writing with me, I was really close to the finish line, and there was like murder and like people impaled on farming equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, the whole tone of the piece changed.
There was a detour there?
There wasn't what?
There was a detour?
Yeah, a little bit. I think just like a kind of reassessing what the story was and how I want to show it, and like internalizing the anxiety more than showing it. So that was a big surprise. Mm-hmm. But I'm grateful for Marty helping me with that.
Yeah. I want to sort of ask about sort of two sort of striking kind of non-writing, non-acting pieces. One sort of, I was struck by the costume design as well as the soundtrack. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your choices there, your collaborations there, goals.
Okay, so I brought Deanna Nunes on really early as production designer, and she created this like really beautiful set of boards just without much discussion. She read the script. She kind of knew that I wanted it to feel moody, quiet, but it was so vintage what she showed me, and I loved it. So we knew right away we want this to feel as nostalgic as we can. So there's a lot of orange, there's a lot of scratchy fabrics, pink, light blue, like, Sissy Spacek at the beginning of her career. It's like basically what the board was. So that, yeah. And Deanna was so, like, she was open-minded but strict about what she was going to allow in the frame in all aspects. And then we had a lot of help getting free costumes or wardrobe from Miller and Campbell, thank you, and Plume, which is a vintage store in Bayview. So we had really great assets in town to play with. And then there were a few wardrobe items from the actors that just like were awesome.
If you have this one shade of pink, please bring it.
Basically, yeah. Or like anything with a super long lapel, like please. If we don't use it, we'll use it somewhere. So yeah, that was one of like the biggest decisions, I would say, is what they wore and how different everyone was from each other.
Yeah.
And how like dark brown, yellowy Ada was, and how pink, blue jeans Marissa was. So yeah. That was big. I forgot the second part of your question.
Soundtrack.
Oh, that's one of our biggest fights, actually. Do you want to talk about that?
I was wrong, so I don't mind talking about it. In the end, yeah. At one point, the soundtrack was originally we were going to go for something more 50s kind of girl group, sort of, right? Something more old school, because the movie is like a attempt to do like a modern version of a sort of family getting together for the holidays kind of thing. And so we wanted to kind of like play into that a little bit with the soundtrack, but there was just like a disconnect there where it just wasn't working and it was not playing mood wise well enough. And so Kristin has happened to be friends with, if you want to take this from here, Kristin.
Well, I met this like wonderful artist, I don't know, 10 years ago in San Francisco, Madeline Kenny, and I've been obsessed with her music. And it's like that really lovely, like synth, but it still feels natural. Like it's in the movie. So yeah, you'll be able to hear it. And her voice is incredible. And it's just like sad girl summer music that I love. And I was like, let's try it. I don't think we could ever afford it, but let's just put it in there and see if it works. Because I was putting like Roy Orbison kind of music, you know, into it. So very different. And Marty was so on board with that at first. And he's like, he was afraid that I was compromising my vision, which is like, great. Thank you. Please always push back. And that's like what I love about working with Marty. But then we did it and it was like, yeah, this not only fits the tone, it deepens.
It improved the movie.
Yeah.
There's a kind of climactic scene in the movie. Once we put, there was the song Uncommon, which you can look it up. It's Madeline Kenny's off Madeline Kenny's first album. Once we put it into the scene just was not working in post, no matter how many attempts we made, but we put the song in and it was such a wild choice in the scene and it worked so well that it was like, that's what I was just like, all right, I'm wrong. I admit I make mistakes.
And then we went to get ice cream and we were fine.
There's next time someone asks you about a surprise, you now have your story to tell about a surprise, Marty.
Yeah. To continue the soundtrack, the other parts of the soundtrack were not all Madeline Kenny songs. Some of them were done by a local musician composer whose band shirt I am wearing, Scott Carey, who also recreated. Let me take that back. He did a version based on a Coasters, like old Coast songs by the Coasters, for like the kind of linchpin game scene that happens early in the movie, which we both just like loved. It's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, check out
Scott's music. Scott is incredible. He also was Marty's co-director of their first feature film. So we've been making films with him this whole time. It was just so nice to work with him in this capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, these kind of collaborations to sort of re-underline this sort of tone we started with and talking about the sort of community and this sort of opportunities to kind of have people come in fully ready to like see out your vision, but also like challenge it and push it maybe 2 steps more into the frame or whatever it is, or out of the frame, depending on what that needs to be. Yeah. What are you working on now? What are you working on next?
This is a hard question to answer. Quarantine has been both very good. I will speak for myself right now. Very good for me, but also really disheartening because we were hoping we were going to shoot a feature film this summer. The details weren't completely firmed up, thank God. But so that was like a little bit of a heartbreak. But then all of this time opened up for me where I'm not producing anything, I'm not doing anything. So I'm writing, and it takes me, like Marty kind of alluded to, it takes me much, much longer than other people to create a screenplay. But there's just like 3 or 4 in the process that I'm really happy about. But then I'm kind of just writing poems right now that I'm really excited about. So, poems. Marty's turn.
You can find Kristin's poetry online. She's published in many places. I was hoping to direct a movie this year. Obviously, that got pushed back for. I don't remember what the reason was. It's hard. It's vague. The details are vague. What could have pushed it back? But I'm hoping to shoot that next year. It's called Early Bird. It's about a community theater. So hopefully that'll happen. But even trying to plan for something for next June seems impossible at this point. So yeah, that's what's coming up next, hopefully.
And you're taking RINGOLEVIO on the virtual road.
Yeah.
You are still mid circuit, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
So
We
continuing.
have a few more things lined up at the moment, I think, and then looking into 2021 with that.
Yeah, and sort of keep like getting to connect with audiences in the ways that you can in these times, and to sort of share the story. Yeah. And you will be participating in a panel to talk a little bit more about the process of making the film, talking specifically about working with actors. That's on. I wrote it down, and now I don't know where it went. Do you know when it is, Kristen?
I believe it's the 24th.
Yeah.
Excellent.
At a certain time.
That sounds right.
I think it's at 6, because I think what I noticed when I was trying to figure out when it was is that I wrote down the time but not the date. So good. You know the date. That was a test. Just be testing you to see if you know what time you're supposed to be there. Yes. Excellent. Well, thank you both for sharing your film with us. Folks who haven't yet had a chance to see it, it'll be playing through the festival until the 29th. And we will see you at the panel next Saturday, and have a great night, everybody.
You too. Thanks so much.